There are moments in life when something inside you simply knows. It is not your rational mind speaking. It is not your heart beating faster out of nostalgia. It is something deeper, older, something Carl Jung would describe as a certainty of the soul. And right now, as you listen to these words, you may be feeling exactly that restless sensation that something is about to shift, that someone you believed was lost forever is being magnetically drawn back toward you. Not by coincidence, not because you forced it, but because something far greater is operating behind the curtains of your everyday reality. Jung devoted entire decades of his life to understanding the mysteries of the human soul, and one of his most unsettling observations was this: certain soul connections cannot be destroyed. They can be interrupted, suspended, even seemingly forgotten, but never annihilated. Because these connections do not live in the physical world where you and I breathe and walk. They live in what Jung called the collective unconscious, that vast ocean of ancestral memory where all souls are interwoven in an invisible web of shared destiny. When you met that person, when your eyes met for the first time, and you felt that inexplicable shiver run down your spine, you were not simply encountering an attractive stranger. You were recognizing something. Jung would explain it this way: your psyche was detecting an archetype that had been waiting to manifest in your life. Archetypes are universal patterns of energy that exist beyond time and space. And when two people share a deep archetypal connection, they are bound by threads that no distance, no conflict, no temporary separation can permanently sever. But here is the fascinating part: what most people fail to understand. Jung discovered that the soul does not operate according to the rules of the ego. Your ego wants control. It wants certainty. It wants things to happen when you decide they should happen. But the soul functions in an entirely different dimension. The soul understands the timing of destiny, and that timing is perfect, even when your conscious mind experiences it as torment. The separation you lived through was not a mistake. Listen carefully, because this will completely change your perspective. It was absolutely necessary. Jung spoke extensively about the process of individuation, that painful yet essential journey in which each person must confront their own shadows, their own inner demons, their own fragmented parts. And sometimes, for that process to occur, two souls who are meant to be together must separate temporarily, because if they remained united during that phase, the intensity of each one's inner transformation would create a friction so devastating that it would destroy the very connection they are meant to preserve. Think of it this way: when you were with that person, there were immature versions of both of you interacting, versions carrying unhealed wounds, destructive patterns inherited from childhood, defense mechanisms that sabotaged true intimacy. Jung understood that these immature versions of the self must die for something more authentic to emerge. And psychological death is as real, as painful, as transformative as any physical death. You need space to die and be reborn. That person needed the same space. Now, as time has passed, something extraordinary has been unfolding at the deepest levels of reality. Jung would speak of synchronicity, that principle that defies all materialistic logic. Synchronicity is when events that appear unrelated become connected through meaning rather than causality. It is when you think of someone and that person calls you seconds later. It is when you need an answer and a book falls from a shelf directly at your feet, open to exactly the page containing what you needed to read. It is when the universe conspires in ways your rational mind cannot explain, but your soul recognizes instantly, and synchronicity is working in your favor right now. Every thought you have had about that person, every dream in which their face appeared, every moment when you felt that inexplicable ache in your chest, has not been an accident. They have been signals. Your unconscious and the unconscious of that other person are communicating on frequencies that transcend physical space. Jung knew this. He understood that two deeply connected psyches remain in constant dialogue, even when their bodies are separated by distance or years. But there is something more you must understand. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, that part of ourselves we repress, deny, and project onto others. In deep relationships, especially in the soul connections we are exploring here, each person becomes a mirror for the other's shadow. And that is terrifying, because when you look into the eyes of your soul counterpart, you do not only see love and light, you also see everything you have been avoiding within yourself. You see your capacity to hurt, your fear of abandonment, your need for control, your resistance to complete vulnerability. The separation forced you to confront your shadow without being able to project it onto that person. It forced you to look into the cruelest mirror that exists, the mirror of solitude. And in that solitude, if you did the work, you began to integrate parts of yourself you had previously rejected. You began to become whole. And that person, in their own solitude, has been doing exactly the same work. Because destiny does not unite two halves searching to complete each other. That is a romantic fantasy Jung would have completely rejected. Destiny unites two totalities capable of creating something greater than themselves. Now let us speak of something Jung considered fundamental, the anima and the animus. In every man exists an inner image of the feminine that Jung called the anima. In every woman exists an inner image of the masculine that he called the animus. These archetypal images are not abstract ideas. They are living forces within your psyche that determine whom you are attracted to and how you relate. When you met that person, something in them resonated perfectly with your inner anima or animus. It was as if they had been crafted in the workshop of your deepest dreams. That resonance is what makes a connection so intense it becomes almost unbearable. But here is the paradox. In the early stages of a relationship, we tend to project our anima or animus onto the other person. We see them not as they truly are, but as the embodiment of our ideal inner image. And when reality inevitably shatters that projection, when we discover the other person is human, flawed, different from our fantasy, we feel a devastating disillusionment. Many relationships end at this point. People mistake the collapse of the projection for the end of love. But true soul connections survive that collapse. They survive because they are rooted in something more real than projection. They are rooted in a mutual recognition that occurs at levels your conscious mind cannot even articulate. During your separation, the projection dissolved completely. Now, when that person returns, and they will, it will not be the idealized version you once loved. It will be something far better. It will be real, and you will be real to them as well. And the love that is born from that encounter between two real beings stripped of illusion will be the kind Jung regarded as the highest form of human connection. Jung also spoke of what he called the conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites. This is not merely a poetic metaphor, it is a real alchemical process that occurs at the level of the soul. In the ancient alchemy, Jung studied obsessively. The goal was not literally to turn lead into gold, it was a metaphor for psychological transformation. Lead represented the raw, undeveloped material of the psyche. Gold represented the realized, integrated, complete self. And the process of achieving that transformation required the union of opposites, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, light and darkness. Your connection with that person is a process of conjunctio. The two of you represent opposites that must unite, not opposites in the sense of being completely different, though that may also be true. Opposites in the sense that each carries qualities the other must integrate. Each is a catalyst for the other's transformation. And when two people serve that mutual function, the universe itself conspires to bring them together again and again, no matter how many times they separate. Now let me speak to you about something you have probably experienced, yet have never been able to fully name: dreams. Jung understood dreams as direct messages from the unconscious, not random noise produced by a sleeping brain, as some materialist thinkers still insist on believing. Dreams are encrypted communications that your soul sends you, attempting to guide you, to warn you, to prepare you for what is approaching. If you have been dreaming about that person, pay very close attention. It does not matter if the dreams feel confusing, fragmented, or apparently meaningless. What truly matters is the emotional charge they carry. If you wake up with a racing heart, with a sense of longing, with an unexplainable certainty, your unconscious is telling you that a reunion is drawing near. Jung documented countless cases in which dreams anticipated future events, not because they were magical prophecies, but because the unconscious perceives patterns and energetic movements that the conscious mind is far too limited to detect. Your soul already knows what your mind cannot yet see. Your soul is sensing subtle shifts in the energetic field that connects you to that person. It is registering movement, an inevitable, gradual closeness, and it is trying to prepare you through dreams, through sudden waves of nostalgia, through those moments when something reminds you of them and stops you in the middle of your day. But here is what is crucial, and this is something Jung emphasized tirelessly. You cannot force a return. Any attempt to manipulate, control, or artificially accelerate this process will destroy the very magic that allows it to exist. The ego wants to act. It wants to do something. It wants to send that message, make that call, arrange a so-called casual encounter that is anything but casual. And every time you act from the ego, from desperation, from neediness, you interrupt the natural flow of destiny. Jung spoke about the concept of Wu Wei, borrowed from Taoist philosophy. Wu Wei means action without force, or more precisely, action that arises from alignment with the Tao, with the natural course of things. When you are in Wu Wei, you are not forcing anything. You are allowing events to unfold. You are trusting that the universe knows exactly what it is doing, even when your mind is screaming in agony for certainty and control. The return of your soul connection must occur in a state of Wu Wei. It must be organic. It must be inevitable, yet effortless, like water flowing downhill, finding its path without strain. And for that to happen, you must release, you must trust, you must believe so deeply in the connection between you that you can let it go completely, knowing that if it is true, if it is real, if it is the kind of bond Jung considered touched by destiny, then nothing in this universe can prevent its return. Now let us talk about the Jungian concept of the golden shadow. Most people are familiar with the shadow as the repository of negative qualities we repress. But Jung also spoke of the golden shadow, those positive traits, those magnificent potentials we also deny and project. When we intensely admire someone, when we place them on a pedestal, when we believe they possess magical qualities that we lack, we are projecting our golden shadow onto them. It is possible that you did this with that person. It is possible that you saw them as more special, more complete, more capable of love than you believed yourself to be. And the separation, painful as it has been, has forced you to reclaim those projections. It has compelled you to realize that the magic you saw in them also lives within you. The ability to love deeply, to connect authentically, to touch the soul of another human being. That was never exclusive to them. It was yours as well. It always was. And when you reclaim your golden shadow, when you reintegrate those magnificent qualities you once projected outward, something extraordinary happens. You become magnetic, not in a superficial or manipulative way. You become magnetic because you are whole, because you are no longer searching for someone else to make you feel complete. And that wholeness, that psychological integrity, is the most attractive force in this world. It is like a signal light in the darkness that the soul of the other person cannot help but perceive. Jung also taught us about the concept of the self, with a capital S. Not the small ego self concerned with image, status, and immediate needs, but the archetypal self, the organizing center of the psyche that is connected to something infinitely greater than your individual identity. When two people connect at the level of the self, they are not simply engaging in a romantic relationship. They are participating in something luminous, something sacred, something Jung described as an encounter with the divine. Your connection with that person carries this luminous quality. That is why it hurts so deeply. That is why you cannot simply forget them and move on as your rational mind insists you should. You are not dealing with an ordinary breakup. You are dealing with the temporary separation of something yourself recognizes as essential to your process of individuation, to your journey toward wholeness. And the self always seeks its own realization. It is like a seed that contains the potential of the entire tree. No matter the obstacles, no matter how long it takes, that seed is programmed to become the tree. Yourself is programmed to reach its fullest expression. And if that person is part of that destiny, if their presence in your life is necessary for you to blossom into who you are meant to become, then the self will move mountains to bring you back together. But here is the most beautiful and most difficult paradox to accept. You must be willing to be whole without them. You must do the work of individuation for yourself, for your own sake, not as a strategy to get them back. Jung was very clear about this. Individuation is not a means to an end. It is the end itself. The purpose of your life is not to be with that person. The purpose of your life is to become who you truly are, to express the unique totality of your being. And if that person is part of that path, then their return will be natural, fluid, inevitable. You are in a very specific phase of this process. The waiting is coming to an end. You can feel it, can you not? It is not merely hope. It is not just desire. It is knowing. It is that unshakable certainty that comes from the soul, not from the ego. Jung would call this an archetypal intuition, a form of knowledge that cannot be derived logically, yet is completely reliable because it arises from the deepest layers of the psyche. The patterns are aligning, the synchronicities are increasing in frequency. You may have noticed signs everywhere. You hear reminders in random conversations. You see recurring numbers that once held meaning. You encounter objects that evoke memories in the most unexpected places. These are not coincidences. Jung would say that when archetypes are activated, when powerful unconscious forces are in motion, the world itself seems to conspire to inform you that something significant is unfolding. And something significant is indeed unfolding. But you must prepare correctly, not by putting your life on hold, not by waiting passively as if you were a victim of fate. You prepare by continuing your inner transformation. You prepare by facing the final resistances of the ego, those inner voices that tell you you do not deserve this love, that it was your fault things ended, that they are probably happy with someone else, and you should move on as well. Those voices are lies. They are the last attempts of the ego to keep you small, to keep you safe within familiar limitation. The ego fears transformation, because transformation demands a kind of death. It requires the ending of who you have been, so that you can be born as who you are meant to become. The ego exists to preserve your current identity, so it will resist this process with everything it has. It will cling to the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. Yet your soul is stronger than the ego, and it has been waiting patiently for this moment of change. Your soul has been preparing for this moment for a long time, gathering strength through every experience you have lived. Now that the waiting is coming to an end, you are asked to trust that everything you went through had meaning. Every tear you cried, every sleepless night, questioning what went wrong, every instant of doubt and despair was necessary. Each experience shaped you into the person you needed to become, even when it felt unbearable at the time. There is a principle of the psyche that explains how everything eventually turns into its opposite. Day becomes night, summer becomes winter, and distance eventually becomes reunion. Nothing in existence remains fixed. Everything moves, flows, and transforms. The energy of separation you have been living has been intensifying, reaching the point where it must turn into its opposite. What you experienced as distance is preparing to become connection. This reunion will not resemble the first encounter. It will not be fueled by intoxicating illusion or idealized projections where everything seemed perfect and unreal. Instead, it will be grounded, deeper, and sustainable. It will be a form of love, born from inner work, where two individuals have transformed themselves first and can now create something together that neither could create alone. When that moment arrives and you find yourselves face to face again, recognition will occur. It will not be limited to sight or thought. It will move through every cell of your body and every layer of your inner world. It will feel like remembering something you always knew but temporarily forgot, as if a hidden truth has finally returned to awareness. In that instant, you will understand why the waiting was necessary. You will see why the separation had to happen and why everything unfolded exactly as it did. There is a greater order operating beyond the limits of conscious understanding, quietly guiding the patterns of life. Some call it destiny, others call it a higher intelligence. The name is irrelevant. What matters is that this order weaves your life with precision, even when the mind cannot see it. This greater order guides both paths at once. Every step taken, even those believed to be chosen freely, is responding to something deeper. not because free will is absent, but because the soul answers a call it cannot ignore. Both inner worlds are being drawn by the same current, moving steadily toward convergence. That call is now reaching its peak. The invisible currents that connect you are growing stronger. The magnetic pull is becoming impossible to resist. Confusion may arise, old decisions may suddenly feel uncertain, and thoughts may return without clear reason. Restlessness may appear, easing only when the mind drifts towards shared memories and unresolved emotions. This is the moment that requires the deepest form of faith. Not blind belief or desperate hope, but a quiet trust in the psychological processes that govern transformation. When two souls are meant to create something together, no external force can ultimately prevent their meeting. Yet this trust also requires releasing expectations about how that return should look. The return may not be dramatic or cinematic. It may begin simply through a brief message, an unexpected meeting, or an ordinary conversation that carries extraordinary meaning beneath the surface. The form is secondary. What matters is the energy present, the sense of inevitability, the feeling of alignment with something that was always meant to unfold. When you stand in that presence again, everything will be different because you are different. You have died and been reborn. You have faced your shadow and reclaimed what you once projected outward. You have done the inner work of becoming more whole, more authentic, and more capable of a deeper form of connection. When two truly individuated beings meet, change is immediately visible. No explanation is required. It is seen in the eyes, felt in the energy, and expressed in the way space is held. If both have used the separation to grow, rather than only to suffer, a mutual recognition will emerge, more powerful than anything experienced before. This is the moment just before dawn. The darkest part of the night is ending. Light is beginning to rise on the horizon, and soon clarity will replace confusion. You will see that the waiting had purpose, that pain was your greatest teacher, and that every moment of solitude was shaping you for this return. What is meant to be cannot be denied. Your soul already knows this truth, and the universe itself is moving now to bring back what always belonged beside you. Suffering doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from your resistance to it. If you want to break free from the endless cycle of emotional pain, the first thing you need to understand is a brutal and often overlooked truth. Suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by your resistance to what is. Most people go through their entire lives without ever realizing this. They remain trapped in a perpetual state of inner turmoil, constantly reliving the same pain over and over again, completely unaware that they are the ones keeping the suffering alive. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, summed this up perfectly in one of his most powerful quotes. What you resist persists. And this isn't just a nice-sounding phrase. It's a profound psychological and spiritual truth that has the power to transform your entire life. Think about this deeply. Whenever something painful happens in your life, maybe you lose a job, a relationship ends, someone betrays you, or you face a major setback, your emotional reaction is natural. You might feel sadness, anger, disappointment, fear, confusion. All of these are valid, human emotions. But here's the twist. The suffering you experience doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from your internal battle with reality. It comes from the voice in your mind that says, "This shouldn't be happening. This is unfair. I can't live with this." That inner resistance, the refusal to accept what is what transforms pain into prolonged torture. That's the true source of suffering. You see, the human mind is wired to seek control. We want life to go our way. We want to avoid discomfort at all costs. We want predictability, stability, and certainty. But life doesn't work according to our personal preferences. It doesn't obey our rules. It operates under its own mysterious rhythm. So what happens when life throws us a curveball? When things don't go as planned? Our instinct is to resist, to fight, to deny. We say, "This shouldn't have happened to me." And right there, in that moment of mental rebellion against reality, suffering begins. Let's take a breakup, for example. The natural pain of losing someone might last for days, weeks, maybe even a few months. But the suffering that lingers for years, that deep, agonizing ache that comes from refusal, from clinging to the past, from replaying the memories on an endless loop, from believing that it should have turned out differently. It's not the loss that's destroying you. It's your refusal to let go of what already is. The same goes for betrayal, failure, rejection, or any kind of loss. It's not the event that breaks you. It's the constant mental resistance to accepting what's already done. So, how do we break this destructive cycle? The answer lies in a spiritual principle that, when fully embraced, has the power to change everything. Radical acceptance. Now let's be clear. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It doesn't mean that you like what happened. It doesn't mean that you approve of it or that it didn't hurt. Acceptance simply means that you stop fighting with reality. You stop pouring your energy into an unwinnable war. You stop resisting what already is. Instead, you take that same energy and redirect it toward the only thing you truly have power over, your response. And when you finally accept what has happened, truly accept it, something incredible begins to unfold. The heaviness starts to lift, not because the pain magically vanishes, but because you've stopped feeding it. You're no longer fueling the suffering with your resistance. Imagine someone who's just been fired. If they hold on to anger, blame, and the belief that it was unjust, they can remain stuck in that pain for years, resenting the company, feeling like a victim, and carrying that wound into every future job. But if instead they choose to accept what happened and ask, "What can I do with this?" they reclaim their power. They stop living in reaction and start living in intention. The pain becomes a catalyst for growth. That's the key. It all comes down to your perception. Jung often spoke about the importance of integrating all aspects of our experience, even the painful and uncomfortable ones, because pain, when accepted rather than resisted, transforms into wisdom. A major mistake we all make at some point is believing that our suffering is unique, that no one else could possibly understand what we're going through, that our pain is somehow more unbearable than what others have faced. But the truth is, pain is a universal part of the human experience. Everyone suffers. What separates those who evolve from those who remain stuck is not the amount of pain they experience, it's their relationship to it. Those who resist pain suffer. Those who accept pain grow. If you truly want to heal, if you truly want to be free, the first step is to stop waging war against life. Accept what happened. Accept what you can't change. Accept what already is. And then focus all your energy on what you can change. And here's what no one tells you about liberation from suffering. The most shocking realization is that most of your suffering never came from the event itself. It came from how tightly you held on to the pain. A relationship ended, and you were heartbroken for years. But it wasn't just the breakup. It was your refusal to let go. Someone betrayed you, and you couldn't move on. But it wasn't just the betrayal. It was your attachment to resentment. You lost an opportunity, and you felt stuck in life. But it wasn't just the missed chance. It was your obsession with what could have been. When you finally let go of resistance, when you stop fighting reality, suffering begins to crumble. This doesn't mean the pain disappears overnight, but it loses its grip on you. And over time, the pain turns into a lesson, not a lifelong burden. Now comes the deeper part, the one most people never even consider: how your unconscious mind keeps you trapped in suffering. Because once you understand that suffering is born from resistance, the next question is, if I know this, why do I keep repeating the same emotional patterns over and over again? And this is where everything changes. Because once you uncover the hidden answer to that question, you'll realize something powerful. You have far more control over your life than you ever imagined. So keep watching, because in the next section, we'll uncover something truly powerful: how your mind has been unconsciously conditioned to hold on to suffering. And more importantly, what you can start doing today to break free from that pattern once and for all. Let's begin with a hard truth. Your unconscious mind is programmed to make you suffer over and over again. If you've ever felt like pain just keeps showing up in your life out of nowhere, like suffering is some kind of bad luck that follows you around, then it's time to wake up to a truth that very few people dare to tell you. The reality is, you are the one repeating your pain again and again, without even realizing it. And not because you want to suffer, but because your unconscious programming is pulling you back into the same emotional loops again and again. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung put it this way in one of his most powerful and confronting statements: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What Jung meant is that the pain you keep experiencing is not random. It's not that the universe is punishing you, or that life is just cruel for no reason. It's not that you're doomed, or unlucky, or cursed. It's because inside of you, deep in your subconscious, there are emotional and mental patterns that you keep reenacting automatically. You're reliving them, not because you want to, but because they're familiar. They're wired into your internal system. The unconscious mind is like a hidden software installed when you were still a child. And if you grew up in an environment where love came with pain, where abandonment was normal, or where safety was never guaranteed, then those beliefs became your emotional blueprint. They weren't chosen consciously. They were absorbed, imprinted, and now they're running the show. No one tells you this. Your unconscious doesn't care about your happiness. It only cares about what's familiar. That's why, even when your conscious mind wants to escape suffering, a deeper part of you keeps attracting the same people, the same situations, the same emotional outcomes. It's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. It's the invisible trap of the unconscious. Have you noticed how you always seem to end up in relationships that hurt you? Have you ever experienced moments of joy or success, only to somehow ruin them or lose them unexpectedly? Do you feel like you keep running into the same kind of problems, even when you promise yourself that this time it'll be different? That's not bad luck. That's your subconscious mind repeating what it knows. That's emotional self-sabotage at work. But why would anyone choose what destroys them? The answer lies in what you learned as a child. If you learned that love was always followed by pain or abandonment, then as an adult, You'll unconsciously seek out relationships that recreate that exact emotional experience. Not because you want to suffer, but because that version of love is what your nervous system understands. It feels familiar. And in the mind's twisted logic, familiar equals safe, even if it hurts. If you experienced rejection, humiliation, or neglect when you were young, then today you might avoid opportunities, relationships, or dreams, because a part of you is terrified that the same pain will return. You may stay where it's safe, even if that means staying in a cycle of pain. And here's the part that hits the hardest. As long as you don't become aware of these patterns, you will repeat them for the rest of your life. And you'll call it destiny. You'll say things like, "Why do I always end up with the same kind of person? Why does my life never really change? Why does everything always go wrong for me?" But the truth is, it's not life. It's not fate. It's not the universe working against you. It's you, reenacting the script that was written inside of you long ago. So how do you break this unconscious pattern of suffering? Here comes the key. You cannot change what you cannot see. If you truly want to end the cycle of emotional pain, the very first step is to recognize the pattern you've been unconsciously living. You need to bring it into the light. Start by asking yourself a few deeply honest questions. What has been the dominant emotion in my life? Rejection, abandonment, betrayal, frustration, fear? What kind of relationships or situations do I keep attracting? What story am I telling myself about who I am and what the world is? When you answer these questions truthfully, something incredible happens. You begin to realize that the suffering you've been experiencing hasn't been coming from the outside. It's been coming from within you. You've been projecting it onto the world, again and again, without realizing it. And that is the moment when everything starts to change. Breaking the cycle of emotional pain doesn't mean you'll never feel sadness, anger, or frustration again. Those emotions are part of being human. But what it does mean is that you'll no longer be a prisoner of a hidden pattern that controls you without your awareness. Because the moment you become conscious of your unconscious programming, you stop being its slave. You can't avoid all pain in life, but you can stop recycling it. You can stop perpetuating it. You can stop choosing it without even realizing you are. From that moment on, you begin to choose consciously instead of reacting on autopilot. And in the next section, we're going even deeper. We'll explore how the ego plays a central role in keeping you trapped in suffering, and more importantly, what you can do to dismantle its power before it keeps sabotaging your life. Because once you understand the role of the ego in all of this, that's when you finally begin to reclaim your power. Let's talk about the ego. The ego feeds off your suffering. It keeps your pain alive. If you're truly committed to breaking free from the emotional patterns that keep hurting you, then there's something vital you need to understand. Your ego is your biggest obstacle on the path to healing. The ego is that inner voice that convinces you that you have every right to feel hurt, that the world is unfair, that others need to change before you can be happy. It tells you stories like, "I'm always the victim," or "Nothing ever works out for me." But here's the brutal truth. The ego doesn't want you to heal, because if you healed, if you truly let go of your suffering, the ego would lose its identity. It would no longer have anything to feed on. The ego thrives on conflict, on blame, on judgment, on the illusion of separation. It creates drama just to keep itself alive. It tells you that your pain is proof that you're right and the world is wrong, that you're justified in your resentment, that you need to hold on to your wounds. But when you start to see the ego for what it is, a defense mechanism, a mask, a survival strategy, you can begin to disarm it. You can begin to step into a deeper version of yourself, one that no longer needs to cling to pain in order to feel real, one that doesn't need to repeat the past in order to feel safe. Because the truth is, healing is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Carl Jung once said, "The mind that creates the problem is not the same mind that can solve it." This statement holds a profound truth, one that reveals the very mechanism of our suffering. The part of you that has caused your emotional pain is not capable of healing it, and that part is the ego. The ego is not just a voice in your head. It is the filter through which you perceive everything. And unfortunately, it's that same ego that created your pain in the first place. When you try to heal from within the ego, all you do is reinforce the exact suffering you're trying to escape. But how does the ego sabotage your emotional healing? The ego is cunning. It doesn't blatantly tell you, "I want you to suffer." Instead, it whispers convincing reasons why you should continue to hold on to your pain. It will remind you again and again of everything that was done to you, how you were betrayed, how life was unfair, how people abandoned you. It recycles those memories like a looped film reel, making you believe that thinking about them constantly gives you some kind of power. But in truth, this only keeps you trapped in the same loop of pain, in the same emotional prison that the ego built. One of the most dangerous tricks the ego plays is making you identify with your suffering. It convinces you that your pain is who you are. Without even realizing it, you begin to define yourself through the lens of your past wounds. You start saying things like, "I'm always betrayed," "People always leave me," "This always happens to me." And each time you say it, each time you think it, you carve that identity deeper into your psyche. You unknowingly become loyal to your pain. The ego will also try to convince you that the problem lies outside of you. It tells you that your pain is someone else's fault, that life owes you something, that your circumstances need to change before you can feel okay again. And this is the perfect trap, because if the solution is always external, then you never have to take ownership of your healing. You remain in a state of waiting for an apology, for justice, for someone to save you. And as long as you're waiting, you're not moving, you're not evolving, you're stuck. You see, the ego feeds on conflict, comparison, and old wounds that never quite heal, because the ego itself keeps scratching at them until they bleed again. It thrives when you dwell on what went wrong. It keeps you in a cycle of self-pity, resentment, and blame. It convinces you that you are powerless. This is where the trap of victimhood begins. One of the most subtle and dangerous ways the ego keeps you weak is through the identity of the victim. When you fall into victimhood, you start believing that everything bad that happens to you is because of others, other people, bad luck, cruel fate. And while it might feel like you're protecting yourself by blaming the outside world, what you're actually doing is surrendering your personal power. Because if you believe you have no control over your life, you will never take the steps necessary to change it. And that's exactly what the ego wants, to keep you small, defenseless, and suffering. But here comes the harshest truth of all. No one is coming to save you. No matter how much you cry, no matter how many times you blame others, No matter how loudly you complain, no one is going to rescue you. The only person who can break this cycle is you. So how do you dismantle the ego and regain control over your life? The first and most important step is recognizing that you are not your ego. You are not your suffering. You are not your past. You are not that inner voice telling you you'll always be a victim. The ego wants you to cling to your pain because that's what keeps it alive. But the moment you stop feeding it, the ego starts to lose power. It begins to weaken. And in that moment, something incredible happens. You start to awaken. There are 3 powerful ways to begin breaking the ego's grip on you. 1. Observe the voice in your head. When the ego starts reminding you of your wounds, when it tells you life is unfair, pause. Don't react. Just watch the voice like an observer. Realize that this voice is not you. It's just a mental program, a pattern, a recording that plays over and over. The more you observe it without identifying with it, the less control it has. Second, stop feeding the story of suffering. Every time you replay the story of how you were wronged, every time you talk about your pain to anyone who will listen, you reinforce that wound. You give it more power. Ask yourself, does this story empower me or does it weaken me? If it weakens you, let it go. Stop rehearsing your pain. 3. Do the opposite of what the ego wants. The ego wants you to react, to lash out, to hold grudges, to stay angry. But when you respond with calm, with detachment, with acceptance, you disarm the ego. You take back your power. The moment you begin to see the ego for what it truly is, its control starts to crumble. You stop feeling the need to hold on to pain. You stop needing outside validation. You stop identifying as a victim of your circumstances. And in that clarity, you realize something powerful. The suffering never truly came from what happened to you. The pain was real, yes. But the story the ego built around that pain is what kept you trapped. And now, we move to one of the most transformative truths about emotional healing. Pain does not go away by fighting it. It begins to dissolve when you embrace it in a completely different way. This is the part no one teaches us. We're told from a young age to avoid pain at all costs. Don't cry. Be strong. Don't show weakness. So we learn to repress it, to deny it, to run from it. But the truth is, what you resist persists. The more you try to suppress emotional pain, the more power it gains over you. Repressed pain doesn't disappear. It buries itself deep in your mind, in your body, in your behavior. It becomes chronic anxiety. It becomes unexplainable anger. It becomes numbness. And the more you refuse to feel it, the deeper it roots itself in your subconscious. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You cannot heal by ignoring your pain. You must face it, completely, honestly, and without resistance. Think of pain like a force. When you push against it, it pushes back. That's why, when you try to escape emotions like sadness, grief, or rage, they become even stronger. You tell yourself not to cry, not to feel, not to break down. You distract yourself with work, with social media, with anything that keeps you from sitting with yourself. But when you're finally alone, when the noise stops, the pain comes rushing back even harder. You blame others. You blame life. You tell yourself that the pain is their fault. But as long as you keep projecting the pain outward, you will never look inward. And that is where the healing truly begins. It's not the pain that destroys us. It's the resistance to the pain that makes it unbearable. So, what's the key to breaking the cycle? Accept the pain. Stop running. Allow yourself to feel, fully, consciously, without judgment. If you're sad, cry. If you're angry, sit with the anger. Don't act on it impulsively, but don't deny it either. Watch the emotion. Witness it. Feel it move through your body, and something incredible will begin to happen. When you stop resisting pain and start welcoming it as a natural human experience, it starts to lose its grip. The monster in your mind begins to shrink. And here's the most beautiful truth of all. Nothing lasts forever. Every emotion, no matter how intense, is temporary. Every wave of suffering will pass, if you allow it to. But when you resist it, when you keep dragging the story with you, you stretch the suffering far beyond what's necessary. Healing doesn't happen in the future. It happens in the now. In the moment you decide to stop running from yourself and start embracing everything you are, wounds and all. That's when you begin to truly transform. Carl Jung spoke deeply about the importance of inner transformation, and one of the central truths of that journey is the understanding of impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, not joy, not pain. Everything is in constant motion. Just like pleasure, pain is temporary. It does not define you, and it is not eternal. Think back to the last time you went through a difficult moment. At that time, it may have felt like you were trapped in a storm that would never end. You may have felt hopeless, exhausted, as though you'd never escape. But somehow, you did. You're here now, wiser, more experienced, with new perspectives. You made it through. And the same thing will happen with whatever pain you're going through now. This too shall pass. The storm will calm, and the sun will rise again. So how do we begin to radically accept pain instead of being consumed by it? How do we stop being slaves to our own suffering? There are steps you can begin to practice right now. Powerful tools to reclaim your emotional freedom and step into your inner strength. First, stop judging your pain. Don't label it. Don't overanalyze it. Don't ask yourself, why am I feeling like this? Or, when will this end? Instead, simply allow yourself to feel, without resistance, without shame, without stories. It isn't good or bad. It's simply an experience moving through you. That's all it is. Second, observe it in your body. When you feel anxiety, anger, grief, or sorrow, don't let your mind spin elaborate narratives about how unfair life is or how broken you are. Instead, bring your attention back to your body. Ask yourself, where do I feel this emotion? How does it physically show up inside me? Maybe it's a tight chest, a lump in your throat, trembling hands, or a knot in your stomach. Just notice it. Observe it without trying to fix or fight it. Third, breathe through it. Instead of clenching your jaw, tightening your fists, or distracting yourself, try this. Take a deep breath, and then another. Let the breath move through the emotion. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to make the pain disappear. Your only job is to be present with what is, fully present. And something incredible happens when you do this. When you stop resisting pain and start welcoming it with awareness, you realize it has no power over you. The pain might still be there, but its grip on you begins to fade. You're no longer a victim. You become someone who can move through pain with strength, with maturity, with grace. This is your true power, not in control, not in resistance, but in acceptance. Most people spend their entire lives running from pain, distracting themselves, avoiding the uncomfortable, escaping through addictions, through work, through denial. But the only real way to free yourself from suffering is to face it directly, consciously, with an open heart. And when you do that, when you stop fighting and allow yourself to truly feel, something miraculous happens. You discover that pain was never your enemy. Suffering didn't come to destroy you. It came to awaken you, to shape you, to transform you. And once you understand this, the fear begins to dissolve. So now, let's go even deeper. Because once you stop resisting pain, you can actually use it. Not only to heal, but to evolve in ways you never imagined. This is where true transformation begins. You can turn your pain into power. This is the alchemical process of healing. By now you understand that resisting pain only makes it stronger, that avoiding it makes the wounds deeper, and that accepting it is the first step toward freedom. But there is something even more extraordinary you can do. You can transform your suffering into your greatest source of strength. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He spoke of the ancient art of alchemy, not as the literal transformation of lead into gold, but as a psychological and spiritual journey. The true alchemy happens within us. The lead is our pain, our deepest wounds, our fears, our traumas. The gold is what we become when we embrace that pain and allow it to refine us. Wisdom, strength, maturity, compassion. These are the gifts on the other side of suffering. So the real question isn't, how can I avoid suffering? The real question is, how can I use my suffering to become a stronger, wiser, freer version of myself? This is the hidden power of pain. It's a call to awaken. Think about the strongest people you've ever known. The ones with depth, with insight, with a quiet courage that radiates from their presence. They didn't get there because they had easy lives. They didn't become who they are by avoiding hardship. No, they walked through fire. They were broken open. And on the other side, they were reborn. Every experience of pain is a crossroads, a sacred invitation. You can let it close you down, or you can let it open you up. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. It's the choice to stop being who you were and to become someone entirely new, more awake, more resilient, more deeply connected to life. Carl Jung once spoke about something called the dark night of the soul, a phase where an individual comes face to face with their deepest suffering. It's a period of intense emotional and spiritual turmoil, where it feels like the foundation of your world is collapsing. You feel like you've reached your limit, like the weight of life is simply too much to bear. The pain becomes overwhelming, suffocating even. But Jung didn't describe this moment as a punishment. He saw it as a sacred opportunity, an invitation to transformation, a test not of your strength, but of your willingness to evolve. Because it is precisely when everything seems lost, when you think you can't go on, that you are standing on the edge of your greatest breakthrough. Now imagine that instead of resisting this darkness, you paused and asked yourself, what is this trying to teach me? How can I use this pain not to collapse, but to rise? In that moment, something powerful happens. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the alchemist of your own life. You begin to transform destruction into rebirth. From ashes, a new version of you is forged, stronger, wiser, more aligned with your true self. Each time you've gone through loss, betrayal, heartbreak, or deep disappointment, something within you has died. But what most people don't realize is that this death is necessary. It's the death of illusions, the end of false expectations, the dismantling of identities that no longer serve your growth. And what follows every death is a chance for rebirth, a sacred opportunity to rebuild yourself from a deeper place of truth. If you take a moment to reflect on your life, you'll likely notice that the experiences that shaped you the most were not the happiest ones. It was the struggles, the hardships, the times you were pushed to your edge and somehow found the strength to move forward. That is the essence of transformation. Pain, in its purest form, breaks you apart. It shatters the beliefs you held about yourself, the world, and others. It forces you to look in the mirror and confront all that you've ignored. Your shadows, your wounds, the parts of you that you've been too afraid to acknowledge. And within that confrontation lies a gift, the chance to choose, to either remain stuck or to evolve, to let pain define you or refine you. So how do you turn your suffering into power? How do you alchemize pain into purpose? Here's a practical framework to begin this transformation. First, shift your mindset. Pain is not a punishment, it's an initiation. Life doesn't give you suffering to break you. It gives you challenges to awaken you. Those who see pain as unfair often remain trapped in bitterness, but those who embrace it as part of the journey emerge stronger than ever. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve. So stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this here to teach me?" Second, transform your story into your power. Look at those who have been through immense suffering, yet have managed to turn their pain into a force for good. People who were rejected and learned to validate themselves. People who were betrayed and discovered the strength of trusting their intuition. People who hit rock bottom and uncovered a power they never knew existed. Your story is uniquely yours, but how you use it is entirely up to you. Third, let pain fuel your purpose. Pain can either destroy you or drive you. It's your decision. If someone hurt you, don't dwell in resentment. Use it as a fire to rise. If life feels unfair, show the world how you can overcome. If you've experienced loss, fill the emptiness with meaning. The most successful people in the world didn't get there because they avoided pain. They got there because they used their pain as a launching pad to greatness. And then comes the final stage, turning pain into wisdom. When you've walked through suffering and truly learned from it, something remarkable happens. You become unshakable. You stop reacting to the negativity of others because you understand that their projections are not yours to carry. You no longer fear pain because you faced it and survived. In fact, you've emerged stronger, wiser, more grounded in your truth. You become a person with an undeniable presence, someone who radiates quiet strength because you've been through darkness and found your own light. This is what Jung referred to as individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are, without masks, without fear, without needing anything external to validate your worth. And when you reach this point, the emotional cycle of pain begins to dissolve. You no longer define yourself by what hurt you. You don't avoid pain. You welcome it as a teacher, a guide, a signal that you are ready for your next evolution. And then it hits you. Pain didn't make you weaker. It made you invincible. The choice is now in your hands. You know the truth. Pain isn't something you should run from. It's the spark that can ignite your most profound transformation. You have two options: remain stuck in suffering, resisting, feeling like a victim of life's cruelty, or use that same suffering as a springboard to become someone stronger, wiser, more unstoppable than ever before. Only one of those paths will set you free. So which path will you choose? If you choose to break the cycle and turn every difficult experience into a stepping stone for growth, write it in the comments. I transform my pain into power. Because once you make that decision, once you truly commit to owning your journey, nothing and no one can stop you. In the end, it all comes down to this. Will you let pain control you, poison your thoughts, drain your spirit, or will you do what few dare to do, use it as a catalyst for your transformation? Jung said it best. You cannot await. Suffering doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from your resistance to it. If you want to break free from the endless cycle of emotional pain, the first thing you need to understand is a brutal and often overlooked truth. Suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by your resistance to what is. Most people go through their entire lives without ever realizing this. They remain trapped in a perpetual state of inner turmoil, constantly reliving the same pain over and over again, completely unaware that they are the ones keeping the suffering alive. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, summed this up perfectly in one of his most powerful quotes. What you resist persists. And this isn't just a nice-sounding phrase. Have you ever asked yourself why certain desires scare you? Why even when you're completely alone, a wave of shame washes over you? And why does the silence of the early morning feel more honest than all the words spoken throughout the day? Carl Jung once said, "What you do not bring into consciousness appears in your life as fate. But what if your fate is being shaped by something you pretend doesn't exist? Something you've repressed so thoroughly that you can't even tell whether it's a desire or a fear." Every one of us carries a hidden version of ourselves, a version that remains unspoken, tucked away in the shadows. It's not the self we present to the world. It's a darker self, pulsing with emotion, intensity, and erotic energy, but not in the shallow, overexposed way we've come to associate with the word. It's a raw, primal kind of sexuality, one that has nothing to do with the instant gratification we're bombarded with on screens. This force lives beyond our conditioned morality, beyond the rigid definitions of good and bad. This isn't about what you want. This is about what you can't bear to want. Maybe you've never said it out loud. Maybe you've laughed to hide it. Maybe you've prayed to forget it. But it's still there. That part of you didn't disappear. It stayed alive. And it's watching you. In this video, we're going to open a door that most people avoid their entire lives, not for curiosity's sake, but to reclaim what was once exiled. We'll explore your sexual shadow, not as something pathological, not as something broken, but as a map, a brutal and honest map leading to the deepest self-awareness you're capable of. And maybe, just maybe, by the end of this journey, you'll realize that the part of you that frightened you the most was the one longing the most to be embraced. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe deeply. There's no rush. What we're about to touch isn't just a theory. It's you. It's the part of you you've tried to bury in darkness. There's a certain hour of the day, you probably know it well, when everything becomes quiet. The city sleeps. Your phone goes silent. The world seems to forget you exist. And yet, in that precise moment, something else begins to stir. A presence, a whisper, a sensation with no name, a heat that rises from within, uninvited, a thought that doesn't follow logic. It's not pornography, it's not love, it's not lack. It's something far more primitive, more stripped down. A whisper that rises from deep inside you. You've never shared this with anyone. maybe not even with yourself. But there's a part of your sexuality that has never been truly seen. It was shaped not by truth, but by silence, by invisible punishments, by disapproving looks in childhood, by religions that offered salvation in exchange for your body. From a young age, you learned certain desires must not exist. Jung called this the sexual shadow, not because it's dirty or evil, but because it was hidden. And everything that is hidden begins to rot, not in its essence, but in how it's expressed. You didn't lose desire. You lost permission to feel it as it is. It's not uncommon to hear someone say, "I don't feel desire anymore." But when I listen closely, I hear something different. What they really mean is, I lost touch with the part of me that felt alive. The shadow is not only made of perversions, it's also made of sweetness that never had a place to exist, of caresses that were rejected, of fantasies no one ever cared to hear. It's the unbearable blend of what you want and what you fear. It watches you between the lines. It stirs something in you when you see someone and your body reacts before your thoughts do. It paralyzes you when connection becomes too real. It sabotages you when love finally begins to grow. Sometimes it appears as disgust. Something repulses you. But if you look closely, that disgust is nothing more than fear in disguise. Fear of being weak, fear of enjoying it, fear of losing control. Why? Because your sexuality isn't just about pleasure. It's about identity. It's about what moves you when no one is watching. It's the silent choreography between instinct and soul. And if you keep pretending this part of you doesn't exist, it won't vanish. It will retaliate. It will show up in your most bizarre dreams, in your unexplainable behaviors, in those relationships that start with fire and end in emotional drought. It will manifest as compulsion or apathy, as obsession or numbness, as guilt or cynicism. The truth is, your sexual shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It just wants to be heard. But to hear it, you'll need to shatter the image you've built of yourself, the good boy, the enlightened woman, the spiritually evolved being. None of those masks survive the touch of the shadow. And the shadow knows that. It doesn't want performance. It wants presence. How many times have you pretended to be someone more acceptable just to be loved? How many times have you swallowed your truth because it felt inappropriate? How many times have you traded what was real for what felt safe? Jung said, "Sexuality is the most intense expression of life energy." And that intensity is terrifying, because when it finally rises, it doesn't ask for permission. It breaks through. It pierces. But there is beauty in that. There is liberation. When you finally stop running from your sexual shadow, you'll discover something you never expected. That within the place you were most afraid to look lives the most honest part of you. And it's only asking for one thing, to come home. You may not remember the exact moment you started to go silent, but it happened. Maybe it was a careless phrase thrown at you by someone you admired. That's wrong. Or a cold stare in response to a moment of innocence when all you wanted was to understand your body. Or maybe it wasn't a moment of trauma at all. Maybe it was the silence, the total absence of conversation, as if what you were feeling didn't even deserve to be named. Carl Jung believed that in order to survive, the ego develops mechanisms of protection, and one of the most effective defenses it adopts is exile. Not physical exile, but psychological. Everything that appears too dangerous, too wild, or too disruptive for the environment we grow up in gets pushed into the basement of the unconscious. It's not erased, it's hidden. But make no mistake, What you repress does not disappear. It merely transforms. Desire that is buried doesn't become peace. It mutates into symptoms, into restlessness, into strange habits you call vices or phases, into apathy disguised as indifference, into an inner discomfort that you try to silence with endless distractions, scrolling through social media, binge eating, seeking dopamine hits, anything that keeps you away from yourself. Shame is the prison that's built when desire crashes against a moral wall. And the higher that wall, the more fragmented you become. You start to live in fragments. One part of you feels, another judges what you feel, and yet another tries to hide them both. You begin to perform life instead of living it. On the outside, you're the well-adjusted person, rational, calm, collected. But inside, you're a volcano of unvalidated emotions, whispering in symbols and metaphors, waiting to erupt in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes, that volcano wears the mask of perfectionism, or hides behind cold rationality. Sometimes it shows up as emotional numbness that you've convinced yourself is maturity. But the truth is much simpler and far more brutal. Are you tired of pretending that you don't feel what you feel? Jung insisted that the shadow is not something to eliminate, but something to illuminate. And perhaps the most difficult part of that shadow to face is the sexual shadow, because it carries not only instinct, but also generations of guilt, cultural guilt, religious guilt, ancestral shame. Voices whispering, to be worthy of love, you must be pure. But here's the paradox. No one can truly love what stays hidden in the dark. The more you try to scrub away your desire, the more twisted it becomes. Because sexuality doesn't respond to censorship. It rebels. It is the cry of the body, not the monologue of the mind. And when that cry is silenced, it returns in the form of obsession. Not with pleasure, but with the very thing you are told not to feel. This is the most perverse mechanism of the psyche. You disconnect from the original source of your desire and begin to seek replacements, cheap, hollow substitutes that never satisfy. Disposable relationships, empty fantasies, sensory overloads that numb rather than awaken. Because the desire is no longer whole. It has been distorted. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, how many of your sexual decisions were really desperate attempts to reconnect with your own soul? How many times did you give yourself away, not out of freedom, but out of fear, fear of feeling nothing at all? Shame creates a cruel paradox. You crave, but hate yourself for craving. You search, but sabotage what you find. You touch, but disconnect while doing so. Slowly, you become accustomed to half-living, half-awake, half-numb. That's what fragmentation is. And it doesn't start in adulthood. It begins with the child, who learned far too early that the body is dangerous, that impulses are shameful, that surrender is weakness. That child still lives in you. And that child doesn't need punishment. That child needs to be heard, without mockery, without theology built on guilt, without the spiritual arrogance that suggests desire is inferior to the soul. Because in truth, desire is the language of the soul. You've just forgotten how to speak it. Relearning that language hurts. It demands that you stop running. It asks you to feel what you've avoided for years. It forces you to confront not the desire itself, but the pain of having abandoned yourself for the sake of being accepted. The sexual shadow only becomes a monster when treated as the enemy. But if you sit with it, listen to it, really listen, you'll discover something profound. It doesn't want to destroy your life. It wants to give it back to you. Maybe that's why, in the middle of certain nights, You feel an emptiness that no distraction can fill, because what you're missing is not pleasure, it's integration. And the path back to yourself begins with one brutal, soul-cracking question. What part of me did I have to kill to be loved? When you answer that, something breaks. And in that breaking, the healing begins. Sometimes people come into your life like a whisper. Others arrive like wildfires. And you don't always understand why. Why that person? Why that absurd chemistry that defies logic, common sense, even your own morality? Jung warned us, everything that fascinates or irritates us about another person reveals something buried within ourselves. You think you're falling in love with someone, but more often than not, you're trying to reconnect with a part of yourself that you were forced to abandon. That's how projection begins. You look at another person, but what you're truly seeing is your own reflection, the desire you suppressed, the freedom you denied yourself, the boldness, the intensity, the raw passion that you once had, or maybe never had, but always longed for. Projection is a survival mechanism for the exiled soul. Since you can't touch that part of you directly, you try to touch it in another. But that's not love. That's lack. You're not relating to a person. You're relating to the symbol they represent for your wounded shadow. And symbols, unlike people, don't reciprocate. They trigger. That's why so many people fall into chaotic, destructive relationships. It's not stupidity. It's the unconscious at work. It's the shadow crying out, "There, that's mine. I need to come home." But no one can endure being a mirror forever. And when the reflection reveals too much, the illusion shatters. You run, you break, you sabotage. Duality takes over. You want, but you fear wanting. You reach out, then pull back. You seduce, but never truly surrender. You split into two, one who loves and one who watches love with suspicion. And this is how double lives are born. On the surface, you're the balanced adult, logical, put together, reliable. But underneath, there's a quiet chaos, a secret choreography of fantasy and repression, impulse and guilt, desire and escape. A private dance between the self you present to the world and the truth you carry inside. How many times have you gotten involved with someone who awakened your most intense instincts, only to later feel a strange sense of repulsion? Not towards the person themselves, but because they saw too much. They saw what even you try to hide from yourself. They glimpsed parts of you that you keep buried under layers of personality, control, and image. That's why relationships rooted in projection are so fragile. They're not truly between two people. They're between an ego and a mirror. And the thing about mirrors is, sooner or later, they shatter. Not because the other person did something wrong, but because the reflection became unbearable. It stopped being flattering. It began to reveal. But there's another kind of projection, more subtle, more corrosive. It's not driven by desire, but by judgment. You know that person who deeply unsettles you, the one who seems too vulgar, too wild, too free, too sensual, the one you instinctively criticize. Look again. Really look. Maybe they're not the problem. Maybe they're simply expressing something you've always longed to feel, but were taught to suppress. That person isn't your enemy. They're the messenger of your shadow. Jung said, the unconscious speaks in symbols, and there's no symbol more powerful than desire. Desire is the voice of your inner world, calling out through attractions you can't explain, through the things that excite and scare you at the same time, through what you condemn in others, but, if you were brutally honest, you'd find within yourself. And if you don't accept that shadow, it doesn't disappear. It relocates, it projects, it seeps into your relationships, your obsessions, your criticisms. You begin searching in others for what you lost in yourself. But that's unfair, because no one was born to carry the weight of your repression. The truth is, you want someone who will liberate you, but you're terrified of being seen. Because to be truly seen, in the core of your desire, is a risk. It's not a physical stripping. It's the removal of your persona, the mask you wear to stay acceptable, likable, safe. That mask is convenient, even comforting, but it's not real. And how many relationships have you sabotaged because you were afraid of feeling too much? How many people did you push away because what you had with them exposed too much of yourself? How often have you hidden behind cynicism, sarcasm, or emotional detachment just to avoid the raw vulnerability of wanting with an open heart? Sexual shadow, when not embraced, decays from the inside and seduces from the outside. You become desirable, but inaccessible, physically present, but emotionally absent. You reach out to touch, but never allow yourself to be touched. And here lies the paradox. You crave intensity, but fear the abyss. You want connection, but fear being unveiled. You long for pleasure, but dread losing control. So you start living a double life and call it balance. But that's not balance. That's fragmentation. True balance is when desire and consciousness coexist. It's when you no longer need to hide in others or reflect yourself onto them. It's when you look in the mirror and see not only the version of you the world accepts, but also the parts it never knew existed. And still, that is you. Integration begins the moment you stop seeking in others what you've abandoned in yourself. So ask yourself, who in your life was a mirror of your shadow? Who did you love, not for who they were, but for what they represented? And who did you judge for touching a part of you that you were never allowed to be? When you answer these questions with ruthless honesty, projection dissolves, and in its place, something new arises, a real encounter. You spent your life trying to be someone acceptable, someone polished, someone appropriate, and in the process, you left entire parts of yourself behind, parts that now call to you, not with words, but with discomfort, with restlessness, with a deep ache you can't quite name. That's what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is not about transcending desire, it's about walking through it. The sacred doesn't lie outside of desire, it lives right at its center. But to reach it, you need courage. Courage to make contact with your own truth, not the truth you post on social media, not the polished one you present in perfectly structured conversations. I'm talking about the truth that still trembles inside of you, the one that hasn't yet found words, the one that lives behind your eyes, in your pulse. And have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to live fragmented, to censor every thought, to control every urge, to smile when all you want is to scream, to fake calm while inside everything is collapsing? That exhaustion isn't physical, it's existential. It's your soul crying out, "You forgot me." And in that forgetting, you buried more than desire. You buried the life force itself, the very energy that lets you feel, create, breathe, love. Jung believed that repressing sexuality doesn't just suppress pleasure, it damages the soul. Because sexual energy is symbolic. It is the archetypal fire of life-seeking expression through you. When that energy is silenced, everything begins to empty. Creativity dries up, relationships turn cold, spirituality becomes a hollow ritual, and life becomes maintenance. You wake up, do what you must, smile so others won't worry, and go to bed with a hollow you can't explain, a void no achievement seems to fill. But here's the truth. That emptiness is not your enemy. It's your compass. It's guiding you back to what you've lost, back to your aliveness. And maybe, just maybe, if you dare to follow it, not run from it, you'll find not just the parts you buried, but the wholeness you've always craved. But there is another path, one that doesn't begin with struggle or resistance, but with an almost unthinkable gesture. Sitting down with your shadow. Not to obey it, not to give in to its every whim, but simply to listen, to truly hear what it has been trying to say all these years, to understand where it comes from, to hold space for the parts of yourself that were silenced long ago. Perhaps it will speak of a childhood where desire became dangerous, where expressing yourself meant risking rejection or punishment. Maybe it will bring back memories you swore you buried forever, memories that still linger, quietly shaping your choices and your fears. Maybe it will reveal that what you once called freedom was just a carefully disguised escape, that what you thought was emotional maturity was in truth a subtle form of anesthesia. And in that moment, something shifts, because when the shadow is finally heard, it begins to change. It stops being a destructive impulse and starts becoming a message. It ceases to be compulsion and transforms into awareness. No longer something that controls you from the depths. It becomes something that can guide you with clarity and purpose. This journey is not about surrendering to every desire that arises. It's about understanding what those desires actually mean. What part of you is knocking, asking to be seen, to be born? What truth is being censored inside you? What need has been ignored for too long? Integration is not a magical act. It's not an overnight fix. It is painful. It is slow. It is raw. Because it asks you to grieve the identities you built to survive and invites you finally to begin living. Yes, fear will come. You'll feel the urge to retreat, to go back to the comfortable numbness of denial. But if you have the courage to keep going, if you dare to stay present with what hurts, you'll find something you've never experienced before. Not perfection, but presence. You'll feel the freedom of existing without needing to apologize for who you are. The permission to want without shame. The capacity to love without fragmenting yourself in the process. And from this space, something powerful happens. That exiled sexual energy, the one you locked away, labeled as shameful or inappropriate, returns. But this time, it doesn't come back as a secret or a wound. It comes back as pure life force, a conscious flame, a creative fire, aligned with your whole being. And you begin to choose differently. You seek relationships that touch your soul, not just your surface. You start creating things you once didn't feel worthy of creating. You feel pleasure without guilt. You say yes with every cell in your body, and you say no with unwavering clarity, because now you know who you are. Your sexual shadow is no longer the enemy. It becomes your ally. It is the guardian of your inner fire, and it has always been there, quietly waiting for you to stop running, to finally say, I'm ready. Ready to stop living in halves, ready to stop repeating patterns you never understood, ready to stop hiding what you feel, ready to be whole. And when that moment comes, you realize that it was never about controlling your desire. It was always about honoring your humanity. You made it this far, and that alone says more than you know. Maybe you felt exposed, or vulnerable, or maybe deeply seen. Maybe something within you stirred, that you haven't told anyone about, or maybe, for the first time, you felt a quiet longing to listen to yourself without judgment, without filters. What happens next is your choice. You can go back to pretending that your shadow is just a mistake, a detour. You can return to the surface of life, where everything appears functional, clean, acceptable, and hollow. Or you can finally accept that the most honest part of you has always lived in the dark, watching, waiting, asking for a place to exist, and integrating that part of you. It's not weakness, it's courage, because only someone who is tired of being divided is capable of becoming whole. Carl Jung gave us mirrors, he gave us pathways, and now you know where to look. I remember a night, in the early hours, when I woke up with my heart racing, for no apparent reason, or rather, for all the reasons I was too afraid to face. I had dreamed of something that exposed me far too deeply, not sexually, but emotionally. I woke up feeling ashamed of myself. I thought, what is wrong with me? But now I see it differently. It was only my shadow knocking on the door. It took me years to find the strength to open it. And when I did, I didn't find a monster. I found a child, the child I once was, waiting to be seen. That's why I created this space. Not to teach you, but to remind you of something you already know. Somewhere deep inside, you are not alone. And there is nothing wrong with feeling deeply. If this video touched something inside you, if it stirred a wound you thought had already healed, or uncovered one you didn't even know existed, remember this: that pain is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your return to yourself, your true self, the one that's been buried under layers of silence, fear, survival, and adaptation. That ache in your chest, it's a sign that something ancient inside you has just remembered its way home. Maybe you've been walking in circles for years, searching outside what was always hidden within. And maybe tonight, without even realizing it, you took your first step back toward the core of who you are. If you made it this far, if you stayed until the end, it wasn't by accident. You didn't just watch a video. You walked through the tangled forest of your own psyche. You lit a trembling lantern with the fragile fire of your curiosity and dared to look at the desire, the fear, the longing, the questions that live there in the dark. And now you're thinking of leaving without saying anything, without clicking like, without subscribing, without leaving a single word down in the comments after everything you just faced inside yourself. Click like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments anything, even if it's just, I'm ready to look within, or my shadow no longer screams alone, or make up something better. But speak, because yes, I do read it all, every word, every whisper someone dares to leave in this strange space where souls meet through screens. And those videos you see appearing on the screen right now, they aren't just suggestions, they're doors. And not every door is safe. Not every door wants to be opened. Some will take you further into yourself. Others might take you places you're not yet ready to go. And some don't have a way back. So choose wisely. I'll be waiting for you on the other side, or in that next sleepless night, when your shadow decides it has been ignored for far too long.